So basically, a lot of the African xylophones were also just kind of shaped wood. Eventually, they would kind of curate it better, but it was just shaped wood with some fruit gourds, like emptied out hollow gourds underneath to make resonators. So there's an example of one there. We'd also it got a few names. One of them being the balafon, which is kind of closer to a folk marimba, but still kind of in the steps of the xylophone. A marimba being different from xylophone because it had a wider range and would go into lower. Xylophone typically now known as a higher octave instrument. But how they would make it in Africa is they would roast wood and then carve the shape to be the specific key that they needed. And then they would kind of carefully create resonators with gourds or apple cores or anything they could kind of shape out. And then they might put some wasp wax into these shells to kind of make a more specific tuning. And then they might change the height over the, kind of hang the resonator in a different way to change the tuning as well. Oh, and the mallets, this part was kind of cool. They would create mallets, like rubber mallets, using something called a wild creeping plant. And it would have this like kind of hard rubber material to it. And where are my examples of that? Yeah, so there's one there. So as you can see, just wood tied together pretty much just with string, and they're kind of burnt up here and shaped in a specific way, and you got all the gourds underneath, which is pretty cool stuff. Now there's a couple specific kinds of African xylophones that we can kind of view over really quickly. A lot of these do have the similar build with kind of the charred and carved wood with the fruit-like shells underneath for resonators. One called the Mbila, I think it's called, from Mozambique, Africa. They were able to make it heptatonic, so it had 7 notes per scale. And they would use these for larger ensembles, which we can see later in a video. And these could go in an ensemble, and you'd have maybe 10 different xylophones with 3 to 4 different sizes. So it'd be a full group, and there'd be choreography involved. And this could be like a way that they do historical dramas. You might have 2 bass instruments as well, called gulus, and they also had gourds for resonators. And then the higher xylophones might have the apple shells there. They would typically have like a leader as well. And the leader had a lot of jobs because he would have to do the words or the poetry, and then the composing and the conducting and the performing all at the same time. A lot of it was improvised. Everyone was kind of improvising with each other but following this leader. And I'll just pull up that video now. Scooby-Doo-boo.
These texts,
And you can see
full of humor and sarcasm,
here
reflect contemporary social issues
in the Google
and
here.
serve to chronicle community events. The orchestras are composed of timbila masters and apprentices of all age groups, with children playing next to their grandfathers.
This was a big thing. So what happened right there? So you'd basically have, in these groups as well, you'd have the leader is kind of leading, and then he would do a fast-paced, alternating rhythm between his hands, and then once that phrase was complete, the whole ensemble would join again, and they would kind of double it, and it went from like pretty rapid to even more rapid with counter rhythms on top of it. So I'll kind of go back to that one part. That was something else I was interested in.
apprentices of all age groups, with children playing next to their grandfathers. Each year, several new pieces are composed and performed at weddings and other community events. The rhythms within each theme are complex, with the player's left hand often executing a different rhythm to that of the right hand. Performances last about 1 hour and feature both solo and orchestra themes using varying tempos.
Another kind of the early African xylophone was the gail. Had about 14 keys. This one was crafted with African hardwood. And this one was a little bit different because it used spider silk around these small holes to create more of a buzzing sound. And when they played with these ones, it was typically played with drum accompaniment. And I think the drum was called a calabash or a gourd drum. And then, again, it was just tied together with string, like you can see here. With some hard mallets here. Again, filling in that wood sound of a xylophone. Got a couple others that were similar. Silimba was a very similar build. And the Amadinda, I think it's called. These were made of logs, so they're a little bit bigger. And these were tuned to a pentatonic scale, and they could take 3 or 4 players to play. Usually people would sit opposite of each other, and they would play the same logs but in interlocking like patterns and in fast tempo. These ones did not have any resonators or any buzzes, but they were logs, so they were bigger. And I'll see where I hid my example of that guy. Oh, no, I want sound. Stop at that part. Pull my face back up. Yerp. There we go. Oh, that's a little big. Cool. Not where I want to be. There we go. And doing computer things. Computer. Yeah. Entering into kind of the European era, the earliest mention of any kind of xylophone in Europe was in Arnold Schlick's Spiegel die Orgelmacher und Orgenstein. And it was in 1511, and I don't know this German word, but it was known for its wood clatter. Did try to find a recording, and I couldn't quite find one. But xylophones kind of made their way slowly westward. They started in Eastern Europe, and they were known in the folk music of Eastern Europe, especially Poland and East Germany. Oh, right. Um, as you saw from the earlier versions from Southeast Asia and Africa, it was typically just held together with kind of some hanging string. Early Europe, they kind of took a slightly different approach. They would just have wooden slabs on some straw and some ropes, and it was also known as the straw fiddle or the stroll fidel, I think. I think one of the earliest notable European xylophone used in orchestra was in Camille Saint-Saëns' Danse Macabre, which was pretty much a piece. Oh, this was in 1874. It was a piece about. Just trying to remember now. It was basically an equalizer song, how every living being will meet with death, and so it was death playing the strings and bringing up the skeletons from, or the dead and the skeletons from the graves. But the relation in this is that the sound of the skeletons could be heard in the xylophone as it would kind of accompany, I think it was the flute or another string melody. I'll try to pull it up here. No, it's definitely not that one or that one. It might be this one. So we'll see. Pull it up here. Yeah. Here we got that kind of conjuring the dead. There was a better example where the sound was a little bit better, so I'll try to find that very quickly.
Grammarly?
Something about Grammarly. There it is. So this is a piece we just heard. Yeah. So it was basically, for the longest time, it was mostly just an instrument that composers would put in sometimes to accompany another instrument, and it didn't have a lot of fame. Can we say that? Until about the 19th century, it started to rise as a solo instrument. It attracted the attention of Mendelssohn, Chopin, and some others. It kind of took some re-engineering over the years before it came to be known as, or we know it as a xylophone today. It kind of started as 4 rows that would go this way, if that makes sense. So the lowest notes would be closer to the player, and they would kind of go out. I have a picture here. It might just be easier for me to show that. So yeah, basically the lowest notes are here. They go out to that way, and then you could have more the black keys kind of on the side here. And as you can see, yes, very hard for sight reading. This was not an easy way to play, but it was one of the first steps that they made the xylophone there. It wasn't until kind of the turn of the century, kind of 1900s and after, that we kind of see the more modern xylophone.